This is Jeff Steiner with the Dad's Resource Center. With me today, I have David Shubert. David is an author. He's gone through some of the things that we talk about here at the Dad's Resource Center, and he's shared his experiences through writing books and podcasts and those types of things. So, David, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for having me on the show this morning.
Absolutely. So I guess just to get the ball rolling, how about sharing a little bit about your story? What has happened with you that led you to become a advocate and someone out there trying to help make a difference on this issue?
Well, like most of the folks who are listening in on your podcast, I am also an alienated parent, but also, in addition to that, I took it's up at the next level where I'm also a left behind parent. And for those that don't know what that means, basically, it's where their child or children have been abducted by the other parent in an effort to keep them out of the target parent's life. So back in 2007, my daughter and stepson were abducted from Colorado, taken overseas, and I've been alienated from them during that time. They were made to come back through the International Hague Convention courts, but a judge here in Colorado ruled that because they'd been gone so long, which was not my fault that it took so long. We know how courts work, even international courts. But because they'd been gone so long, it was in their best interest to remain with the mother and allowed them to return to the country they were just ordered from. Well, needless to say, the mother didn't obey any of the court orders. There were 4 contempt hearings that went on over about, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. Finally, because of that, with the mother not appearing even by telephone, we went to modification in October of 2011. This judge, unlike the first one, understood the dynamics of everything, what the mother was doing, how she was disobeying the court orders, and she reversed the earlier decision in the modification and gave me sole custody of not just my biological son, but my stepson as well. And bad part about that, it came too late. It could have been handled in the first hearing with the original judge, but it wasn't. As it turned out, just like all the other orders that had been issued to her, because she was overseas, she felt she was out of the reach of the U.S. and the courts and the law and everything else. She again obeyed this order to bring the children back. So I continued to fight. And then finally in 2016, I was living in Panama, Central America, and I got tired of all the nonsense that was going on. And so I had a friend of mine, he was actually living in Panama also. He was from Venezuela. He helped me get my Facebook page set up. And I started at that point letting everyone know that what I was going through as far as the emotional aspect of it, the mental anguish, and things like this. And before you know it, it enveloped itself, and the people that were reading it from all over the world, basically, the things I was writing were nothing more than a mirror to what their own lives were at that time. And things kind of just kept progressing from there.
Well, that's extraordinary. Now, of course, we've had going on 200 fathers have reached out to the Dad's Resource Center, and pretty much, as you know, they're common themes to how these things happen most of the time. This is the first time it's been international, like it has been with you.
Right.
But definitely, we've had fathers that mothers have absconded out of state, and they can't. It's really horrible. And even situations where children and youth is involved, and children and youth would rather the children be with the mother, but the mother would catch wind of it and leave, and they're like, okay, there's nothing we can do. I mean, it's extraordinary how there's always some sort of ambivalence or some sort of, well, there's nothing we can do that comes into play in so many different ways in these type of circumstances as you just described.
Right. And that mindset that when these folks, especially law enforcement, say there's nothing we can do, they're wrong. There's a lot they can do because I know in my situation when my daughter and stepson were first abducted, and I learned that they were at the airport in Denver. I called up the sheriff's department and I says, "Hey guys, here's the deal. My kid's been kidnapped by their mother." They sent a couple of sheriff's deputies over to the house, and he says, "You know what? Even if we found them at the airport, there's nothing we can do." And I said, "Why is that?" And they said, "Well, here's the thing about it is that if we did find them, the mother could say, you know what? I'm their mother. They're my children. It's my constitutional right to take them on vacation if I choose to." And I says, "Is that right?" And he says, "Yeah." And she is correct. It is her constitutional right. It took a few months, but I found out these guys didn't know what the heck they were talking about because there was no divorce, there was no separation, there was no court orders allowing her to remove the children to another jurisdiction, whether it's across town, across state lines, across international borders. As such, I retained 50% of custody of the children, and she wasn't able to do that legally. So these law enforcement, when they tell you that there's nothing they can do, they're full of it. And I
So,
outline that in my video too.
so what have you had any contact at all with your daughter or your stepchildren?
About 2 years ago, because of all my writing on social media with my reflection articles, my daughter became curious about me, and I had had absolutely zero contact with her or her brother for all these years. But she had found me on Facebook, believe it or not. And though I didn't catch it, because you know how Facebook is, some of these messages they come into another folder, and it might be 6 months before you even discover they're even there. But a week or two after I'd gotten a message from this young lady, it said, "David, I think I'm your daughter." And I'm like, "Uh-huh," because we know how trolls are. They send these weird messages. They'll, do things on your sites. They like to cause chaos and misery and heartache and pain and all this other stuff. So I'm thinking, okay, if you're really my daughter, I'm going to ask you a series of questions that only my daughter would know the answer to. So I did. And believe it or not, she answered each of them correctly. And it was like I knew I'd found my daughter again, or rather, she found me. We corresponded for quite some time there afterwards, but in February of last year, she says, "I'd like to come back to the United States. Can you help me?" Well, because I did have sole custody of her by this time, I knew that was possible, so I made the arrangements for a flight and crafted a letter, had it notarized, everything else like that. And I got everything to her so she wouldn't have trouble at the airports going through customs and stuff. She arrived back here, I think it was in March of last year, from the place overseas.
So she's back here in America,
She is.
and you guys are you're in communication, and
Semi. She's now living in another city. She is aged out of the system. She's out there spreading her wings like all young people do. But I could tell that the harmful effects of parental alienation has taken its toll because I often talk about this. That depending on the severity of the alienation, the length of time that it's gone on is going to, it's either going to be a situation where it's not going to be that hard to overcome it, but it could take years to get them back into the fold of your life again. And it's not an easy trick. It's not a one size fit all because every child is different, and their circumstances are unique. So, with that in mind, I didn't go into this blindly. I knew that there were going to be certain things I'm going to have to overcome. But, and I tried to seek out reunification counselor last year, but she wasn't going to have that, and you can't force them.
So how old is she now?
She's 18 years old.
And so is she working or, going to school, or do you know what she's doing?
No, she's working,
Okay.
working part-time, as I understand.
Right. Okay. That's one of the things. So a lot of fathers, some of the fathers that come to us, they're just getting into things. And the earlier the better. Because now let me just take it one step back. Most people in separated families work things out reasonably well, right?
Mhm. Correct.
Sometimes the father is the problem. That's an issue. And you and I and everyone else in the fatherhood movement, we want nothing to do with that, right? Men got to
Correct.
be men, treat women and children respectfully, and be the bedrock of the family, not chaos, mean, or hurtful, right? What we're talking about are these types of situations, right? So sometimes they just don't know, and people, they're trying to hold on to their relationship, whatever it is, and the mothers just making business decisions, and they get in a hole, and once you get in a hole here, it's nearly impossible to dig out. Then there are people who are well into it, and they're past the point that you can help them at all, and then there are people who are completely alienated. And one of the most difficult discussions you have is, and some of them, most of them are like, yeah, I've heard that. You just got to try to be there and be prepared, be a good person, and be the stand-up person and do the right thing, and hope that eventually in time, right, they'll catch on, or you'll have your opportunity, and you can, as you're saying, work your way back in their lives. But it's such a, there's nothing that is more traumatic to any parent, but to a father, than losing their family. And as you say, the pain, the agony, the trauma, and that's one of the big discussions in the human services field, and even public school education, everything else. Trauma, trauma, trauma. Men get trauma too, and fathers get significant trauma when all this happens. And so, I hope for the very best, and I hope that opportunities arise, and that your daughter can have grace in her heart, or be open to, and that you guys have that opportunity to more fully reconcile.
Right. And I think that in time it's going to happen. To what extent, I have no idea. The main thing that's going to help and aid us in the healing process for her is the fact that she has removed herself from the life of her alienating mother. So she had, though she probably does have certain phone time with her, maybe emails or whatever, she isn't interface to control her the way she once had that opportunity of. So now my daughter is able to think for herself. She's able to process what has happened over all them years. And, hopefully in time she'll come to recognize that, because let's face it, an alienator, they will lie to their children, they will manipulate them, they will implant false memories of things that never happened, they will threaten to withhold their love from the child if the child doesn't do what they want them to do, which in this case is to hate or forget the other parent. So it's a long learning curve to how to overcome this.
And one of the things that the system loses sight of is that the fathers, in these types of situations, they're the aggrieved party, but
Mm-hmm.
the victims are the children. And the impact on the children are long lasting. Now, my personal story is, I wasn't, I'm not on the business end, so I'm not dealing with what you're experiencing. But I never met my father. To this day, I couldn't tell you who my father is. And my life is defined in so many different ways by not having had that presence in my life. I learned a lot of lessons the hard way, that you learn things from both parents. Moms and dads get different but equally important things to each other. To their children, and the best chance of being successful in life is to have both of those aspects as you're growing up and developing. But the children, what they're going through is, so not having a father in that personal aspect of it, and not having that part of you growing up, you're limited. There's things you don't know. There's a part of you that isn't fully developed. But then when there's the conflict, there, that's even worse, because children, they think it's my fault, and it is, right? If it wasn't for them existing, the conflict between mom and dad wouldn't exist. So they live that real life experience, and it's literally my fault for existing that all of this occurs. And then all the ridiculousness and horribleness that goes along with that, the negotiations, and having all the court system and judges and social workers in their lives, and the intrusion, and having the uncertainty, right? Like at any given time, you could be moved somewhere else or something like that. I mean, you never really get to settle in. So that's the true damage that occurs through all of this, where it's not right, and it's painful to men, and we got to have compassion to the men who are going through this. But the children are really truly the victims that the systems just don't account for whatsoever far too often.
That would be correct. And the thing is with this alienation stuff, and it can be brought on by either a father or a mother. In this instance, both parents are equally guilty in making it happen. Both parents can be victims on this. But what they don't seem to recognize when they're doing this, they think that they're trying to hurt the other parent, the target parent, left behind parent, whatever you want to call them. But in all honesty, all they're doing is they are showing that they don't love their children enough to allow them the opportunity to share and receive the love and support of both parents. So they're actually hurting them on their own.
Very well said, David. There's an absolute blind spot there. That's very much the case. Yes. So, okay, now you have two books that you wrote. There is the Parental Alienation is Abuse, and then the other book, I guess, is your newer book that you've done, that is Stolen Memories. So I guess let's start with Parental Alienation is Abuse. Have you been invited to talk about this, present this, speak to people or communicate? I mean, what's been your experience, the opportunities that you've been given to be able to talk about and provide the information in your book to other people?
I haven't tried to pursue that avenue just yet. I hope to by next year. Though I have spoken to people in a public type setting. In this particular topic, no, I haven't, and I figured I'm not going to do that until probably next year. There's too many things to put in place before that. Now, as far as the books that you were talking about, Parental Alienation is Abuse. Basically, that's a collage of articles, reflection articles that I'd written, before, and I published that in 2017. And I do intend to later on publish another book for the next set of reflection articles later on, because those people, they don't, I mean, sometimes they get taken off the internet, social media sites, they have to search for them, and to have them all in one catalog, hey, they can even sit in the bathroom if they want to read it, instead of taking their laptop and searching. But as far as the memoir, and there's only been a couple, from what I understand, that is, there's only been a couple of people that have written a memoir about their experiences as an alienated parent and being a left behind one at the same time. A lot of these parents, they feel embarrassment over what's happened. They don't want to talk about it to strangers, and many times not even their own family and friends, because they feel like they're the ones to blame, that they're the freak of nature, they're whatever. And that's not true. It's not their fault that they got hooked into the wrong person who would later on reveal themselves to be an alienator. It happens because when we first meet someone, we're attracted to them, number one, physically, that's human nature. But we think we're choosing them, and that's really not the case. These alienators, they all, or vast majority of them, have an underlying mental health issue, right? And one of them is that's most prevalent is their issue of control. They like to control their own environment. They like to control their home, their children, their spouse, their work environment, everything. So if you think that you're choosing that person, that's not really true. They are seeking you out. They are trying to find their next victim. Unfortunately, they're telling you all the things after you become attracted to them. They're telling you all the things you want to hear. And before you know it, they've got you ensnared into their web of deceit. And before you know it, you can't run, at least not fast enough, you know. But as far as that memoir book, it goes into how I met my wife at the time, all the circumstances. This goes over a 20-year period and stuff, and all the circumstances of everything. It has the good, it has the bad, it has the ugly, about the whole range of things. You know, in terms of my relationship, the abduction, the alienation, what I experienced. But it even fully discloses who I am. You know, that I'm not a perfect person, but I certainly didn't deserve what was happening to me. You know, and like I say, there's only been a couple of people who were brave enough to put their story in writing and put it out to the world. Unfortunately, one of them people from the UK, he did this from what I was told here about a month ago. But previously, he had written a book about his alienation from his children. And right after it got published, he committed suicide. You know, so I don't know. I'm hoping that this book gets read by other alienated parents to let them know they're not alone, but also to share the story with people who aren't familiar with alienation or left behind parent scenarios.
So that's kind of I hadn't, maybe at a superficial level, the point you made just at the outset of this, what you just said, um, uh, but it led me to a different. I hopefully going to circle back to it. Um, Most men are deferential to women. Most men are deferential to mothers, right? That's one of the things that you get into with these types of situations. And again, most relationships, whether it's a marriage and a family that stays intact or separated families, you still operate within those confines reasonably well. But these situations, when they spin out, there are those certain personality types that you're alluding to that then are aligned with a man who just wants to have a family and wants to be deferential to mom and do the right thing. And then they just sort of get steamrolled by all of that. And that's kind of, I think, the point that you're making in terms of that specific personality in those types of situations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right. And they, by the time they realized that that mask of deception that was cinched up so tightly, they didn't recognize the person they were actually with before it is lowered, or by the time it's starting to be lowered, they recognize, oh, crud, what did I get roped into? And by then it's too late because now you've got children with this person. And they wait until you have children in the equation, because before, if it was just you and that other individual, you can pack your bags, you can go hit the bricks and move on with your life. But they know that once children come into the picture, it's harder for you to run. They've got you, you know. I suppose in many ways I was lucky that my children were abducted because guess what? I didn't have that. I had to worry about the children, obviously, but I didn't have to worry about having her in my life as far as physically in that sense.
She wasn't able to dangle you. And that's a dynamic I see with many fathers who'd be like, if it was not for the children, I just would move on. And a lot of times the courts, like that even gets communicated to the courts and it's lost on them. The father's like, all I want is to work. Despite all that's happened, right? I will work reasonably, but that person isn't working reasonably. And yeah, that's, oh, wow. Yeah. There are many fathers who that's a lever to continue to be able to maintain control over them and to be mean, angry, and yeah, absolutely.
Right. And I don't know. Like I say, these scenarios happen to both mothers and fathers. We know that before it was super prevalent amongst the fathers, but it's happening more and more with the women as well. But you have to understand, and I'm sure you yourself already know this, alienators, as I mentioned, most times they have an underlying mental health issue, whether it's being bipolar, narcissist, borderline personality, whatever. But they also, it may not even be a mental health issue that they're suffering from, because it could be a personality defect where they have a sense of self-entitlement. Um, they believe I should be able to do whatever I want to whomever, whenever, and wherever without repudiation. Now, the third instance on this is that it's possible that they were raised in a household that alienation and these type of wrongful behaviors were very prevalent. As such, these children, they grow up thinking, oh, this is an accepted behavior, it's normal. And so they grow up into being adults, have their own families, and bring these same things into their future families. Now, kind of going back to the ones that have this underlying mental health issue. Excuse me. I found that the two most prevalent aspects of them, number one, it's they all have in common greed. It's all about the money. And they're going to try to get the money no matter where they can or how they can. They'll either screw others out of their money, like as an example, running up charge accounts on, at stores and not paying them. They might accept government monies that they're not entitled to. But their favorite one is because it allows them their certain revenge on their former spouse. They want the money from the former spouse, so they may go, well, I want alimony. I want as much child support. I want them to also, in addition to these things, I want more money on top of that. So it is a greed factor for them. In a twisted way, instead of just being fair. Okay, you know what? I've got the kids. You're gonna go ahead and pay half child support, things like that. Now, the other thing about it is it's a control factor. When you're with an alienator, and you know this, they have control over you physically and every other way. However, when your relationship breaks down and you're no longer with that person, that's when they feel like, geez, I've got to find a way to regain that control over this person. I can't have it over them physically, but I can get control over them partially, mentally and emotionally. And going back to the other thing, I also control over them financially. Now, the best way they can regain that partial control is through the one weapon in their tool chest, their arsenal, so to speak, is weaponizing the children, because they know the target parent loves their children and will walk to the ends of the earth for their children. So they're able to control them in this aspect.
So I guess all your communications with people who've gone through this, your experience, your observations, um, what how what can be done? What can parents do? Like, how can they handle it? Like, when you're on that end of it, like, what do you say to people?
Well, depending on their circumstances, because we know that the alienator is going to use every tactic in a book to use against you in the family courts. So what I tell parents is that number one, I start off with many times an analogy of an article I once wrote. Basically, we've all suffered from schoolyard bullies. I have, you probably have, other people have. And what a schoolyard bully does, and you'll understand the point I'm making on this in a moment, is that they will seek out the weakest child in their class or on the schoolyard, and they will taunt them, they will pick on them, they'll do whatever in order to get the desired effect and reaction from them. Well, if these children learn to not react to what they're doing, eventually, and just walk away, and ignore them, eventually these bullies move on to their next victim who can give them their desired results. Well, that's the same thing with targeted parents. These alienators are trying to achieve the results of the reaction they're going to get from the target parent. This way here, they can take it into the family courts and say, see what kind of a person there is? This is why I don't want my children around them. And guess what? The judge believes them. But the other thing is, I tell parents that are going through this, number one, you can recognize right from the time you're even together the warning signs of alienation, because your former spouse may start picking fights and arguments with you for no reason at all and do it continuously. And they try to do it in front of the children. Okay. They'll nitpick at you. They will go ahead and belittle you. They will call you names in front of the children. And this is the start of the alienation, because now they're starting to get their children to believe that they're the good ones, you're the bad ones, you're worthless, and they have value. Okay. But it's not until the separation and divorce that it actually picks up steam. That's when the real lies, manipulation, the implanting of false memories, all that other stuff comes into play. Now, what I tell parents is, here's what you do. If you suspect alienation is starting to occur in the infancy stages, start keeping a journal of everything. Keep it private, but later on, depending on your state, you can start recording your conversations. Depending on the state, like I say, it can be a one person authorization that allows these recordings to be used in court. Now, I know in Colorado we allow it. I know in New York they allow it, but some states they go nope, taboo. So when you can, and check with your local state laws, record them. Keep track of all of your emails, what's sent to you, what's received, your text, same thing with your text messages. After the divorce, and if you don't have the children with you and you go on visitations, record down if the alienator is playing gatekeeper. Well, Johnny can't see you today because he's sick, or he's got an event that he's got to do, whatever. But on those times that you are actually able to have contact with your children, choose a public area, one that has visibility, and then take someone along with you as a witness to what transpires, because a lot of times these alienators, they'll go ahead and create a scene when they think no one's looking, and then they'll take it back to the courts, and again, they'll try to use it against you in a way to limit your time with the children. There's a lot of things you can do.
One of the things I tell fathers, trust your guts. Sometimes men were oblivious, particularly when it comes to women. Once you start to get clued in, follow your guts. If you feel like something's off, trust that. Absolutely. So, okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go here, David?
No, just basically, I just want to let folks know that, hey, you're not a freak of nature. You didn't do anything wrong. If you're going through the alienation, it's not your fault. You just happen to get mixed in with the wrong person, and just try to deal with it as best you can. Fight for your children. Never forget them. I've got a YouTube video that'll be coming out probably this weekend that if you are alienated and you're not in the physical aspect of your children's lives, and you're being cut off, it's going to teach you how you can keep track of things. As far as when the time comes, you're going to be able to show your child that you've always been there, that you always have remembered them, have always wanted to be in their life, and when the time comes and it's appropriate, you can present these things to them and show them that, hey, I'm not the bad person here.
Yeah, that's something I've recommended to fathers also, is that do what do you call it, a time vault or whatever, to do these things so that you have them, so that you can go back over time. Yeah.
Hmm.
And the other thing is, you gotta have short-term, intermediate, and long-term goals or thoughts of what you think is best for your situation. So you gotta be operating short-term and try to get things done that you need to get done now, but long-range thinking with that hope when in the extreme situations that you can get it there eventually. And it may take 2, 3, 5 years, 10 years, and just not give up hope, because ultimately, all you can do is fight for your children, and however you're fighting for them, and hope that at some point, that it counts for something.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. Hey, so you had mentioned there's some sort of special or something with that you're doing here. I don't know if you'd like to mention that before we get going.
Oh, okay. That's on the book Stolen Memories. And by the way, it's on Amazon. And when you type it into Amazon, Stolen Memories, because believe it or not, when I first came up with the title for the book before it was published, I thought, hey, great. It's a type of a situation. I've got a great catchy name. It basically, in 2 words, it sums up what it is. And unfortunately, after I published the book, I found out there were a couple of other people that had that same name or a couple of others. So when they type it in, basically they're going to have to type my name, David R. Shubert, Stolen Memories, to find the right one. And as you can see, I'm the guy in the hat. But anyway, for right now, starting today, there is a promotion going on. Normally it's $77.99. For the next week, they can, if they order it now, they can get it for $1.99.
All right. And I think I had and here's your main page there at Amazon.
That's the author page
Author
on
page.
it.
Okay, all right.
You
Okay.
were just actually on it a moment ago where it showed the actual. There you go.
All right. Okay. Well, David, extraordinary story, what you've gone through. And again, my hope is that you continue successfully in your path to be able to work your way in an even more meaningful and fulfilling way back into your daughter's life. And thank you for what you've done, and what you continue to do. It's important. It's a big thing. It's a real thing. It's a tragedy. It's something that is unnecessary, and there are a lot of children out there who are in pain and suffering because of it. So thank you very much.
And I appreciate you having me on here. And, God bless you with the work that you're doing because you're allowing people um, a platform where they can share their stories and hopefully create awareness, letting others know they're not alone.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, God bless, David, and have a good day.
Thank you. Take care now.